Accounts payable is not the most important thing in my business, but without that, nothing works. It is a labor problem that's kind of disguised as a process problem. Outsourcing doesn't solve this. You kind of outsource the headache, hope that it goes away. It doesn't. We think BPOs are 2004. We happen to be in 2026, and there's a different and better way to do this. AI teams are running operations at global scale. The technology is here and now. We replace in-house and outsourced BPOs and in-house teams, shared services teams with AI teams. It's not an AI tool. It's not a software license you buy. Freehand owns the outcome. You hold us accountable. Our largest customer today handles 5.7 million invoices a day, approving, rejecting, and contesting those invoices in under 30 seconds. No human team is able to do this at scale. I walked in here yesterday morning, and all I could hear was AI across the board. And if you're not over-pitched and over-caffeinated by the end of 2 days, I definitely am. I want to talk about what Freehand does. If you haven't seen a bunch of us walking around in orange, there are 5 things you need to know about us. We replace in-house and outsourced BPOs and in-house teams, shared services teams with AI teams. It's not an AI tool. It's not a software license you buy. We essentially run accounts payable for some of the world's largest businesses. Apple and Meta and Johnson & Johnson and Cardinal Health and Baxter and Pfizer and so on. And so at production scale, at global scale, accounts payable is run by AI agents across some of the world's most complex supply chains. AI generally costs lesser than BPOs or shared services. You already have this mental model in your head where you used to have a large team here in market in the US, and you've taken that team and said, look, I'm going to put this in Costa Rica or in Mexico or in India or in Poland, and you've created a shared service structure somewhere, or you're kind of thinking about it now. You're saying, look, accounts payable is not the most important thing in my business, but without that, nothing works. Accounts receivable is not the most important thing in my business, but I got to collect what I've accrued and make sure that my business keeps running. And that working capital mix is important. And so, a lot of companies have started thinking about what's the cost of managing the cost? What is the cost of labor? What's the cost of software, etc.? And just in that same frame of reference, AI essentially helps you run accounts payable, accounts receivable at scale globally, but without as many people, whether that's in-house or outsourced. AI teams sit on top of your existing software systems. So we're not replacing Coupa, Ariba, Medius, or whatever it is that you're using today in terms of underlying systems. We don't need those to operate AI teams. We're effectively sitting on top of existing systems, but replacing the labor layer, which is the headcount and the staffing costs effectively, right? And most importantly, this is here and now. It's not a vision. We've been doing this for 8 years before AI was cool, and this is live in production at global scale. And so we prove it to you with your data. This isn't a 2-year implementation cycle with a lot of consultants and lots of expenses. Essentially come in, look at your data, look at your invoices, look at your contracts, and effectively automate this to the point where you don't need human intervention, and you can see that happening with your data, or you don't pay us. Accounts payable is a labor problem, as is accounts receivable. Most of us are CFOs and controllers in the room, and so we've been hearing about this for a while. It is a labor problem that's kind of disguised as a process problem. Outsourcing doesn't solve this. You kind of outsource the headache, hope that it goes away. It doesn't. You still manage exceptions. You're still responsible for your suppliers and your customers. In-house staff just aren't built to solve the problem, because accounts payable is not just a finance problem. They've got to be experts in logistics. They've got to understand each category that you serve: direct material, indirect material, direct services, indirect services, etc. And offshoring this to a new market doesn't solve this either. When these guys were sitting halfway across the hallway, this wasn't solved. If they're sitting halfway across the world, good luck. Fortune 500 leaders are thinking about this differently. I'd love to talk about one of our customers. Meta had 3 outsourced BPOs that were running their shared services globally. They also had 250 people in different parts of the business that were essentially involved in running accounts payable. They were all not within their finance team, but these were all people who touched an invoice at some point in the cycle. It could be, folks that were coding the general ledger codes. These were people that were approving that extra charge that a logistics vendor had charged in an invoice, or people in operations, people in procurement, somebody that touched an invoice before it got paid out. Freehand went in and effectively said, fire the 3 BPOs. These 250 people don't have to touch an invoice. They will get paid, and they'll get paid accurately every time, and we'll take accountability for it. And we didn't deploy people to do this. We deployed AI agents to do this. And today, 13 people touch an invoice ever. and they do this once a month. 100% of their global spend is essentially managed with agents. This is true at J&J, it's true at Cardinal Health, it's true at Procter & Gamble, and some of the world's largest businesses. So let's kind of talk a little bit about what's happening with all of this AI across the board, right? There's three things that are kind of happening. One, and most importantly, the technology is here and now. If we're still talking about how you can use AI to respond to a chat query, or if we're still talking about how we can use AI to ingest one document, we're stuck in 2021. The reality is most of us are likely stuck in 2004. And so the reality of this isn't hyperbole, a pie in the sky. AI teams are running operations at global scale. The technology is here and now. One. Two, CFOs are kind of becoming the new CEOs. AI native ones are becoming the new CEOs. CFOs are giving out AI as an enabler for productivity gains and headcount cost reductions across the business. You got to see, we've been kicking tires with AI for 3 years now. We got to see the ROI. We've got to see dollars, right? And a great place to start is your backyard, where you essentially have shared services, accounts payable, accounts receivable, great teams to essentially optimize starting today. And then three, a lot of BPO contracts are up for renewal and soon. And so if you have shared services teams, if you have BPOs, if you have pieces of your work that you're either outsourcing today or you're looking to outsource, don't do it. You can effectively just jump to AI that can help you run that process at scale. Digital transformation has been happening for 25 years now with the move to the cloud, and your team is still doing most of the work. We've got accounts payable tools, we've got ERPs, we've got procure to pay tools, etc. They're all doing their jobs, except that none of them have the real full picture, if you will. On the left is how and what your teams and your software systems see. They see PO data, payment data, contracts that are structured. What they don't see is essentially the email approval that's coming out. What they don't see is effectively all of the exceptional approvals that are happening between operations and sales and marketing in each of these different teams, right? Freehand does not just sell you a software tool. Freehand owns the outcome. You hold us accountable for paying your invoices, for ensuring that they are general ledger coded, for ensuring that these invoices are effectively accrued to the right P&L ledgers, to the right business units across the business, right? We don't just provide you a software license. We're a fully managed service that is AI first. Your AP team, you essentially start with one category. Pick any category, your hardest categories. We will start with that category, and in 90 days, we will essentially show you that that category can effectively be run with AI teams that can run accounts payable for that category. You then scale across categories. Add 4 to 5 more categories, and within the next 90 days, you will see how this scales across different categories. And this is every finance team's bane, where accounts payable is removed from procurement, is removed from operations, and oftentimes reports to different people in the business. And so really connect accounts payable back to procurement and back to the operations teams. We automate the entire workflow, and we go into individual category depth. Real-time context ingestion, no more data entry for anything. Pre-invoice costing, before your invoices hit your books, what does it take to actually understand what you're going to pay before the invoice hits your books? Deep audit matches, not just with structured data, but with unstructured data, with emails, with documents, effectively looking across the entire spectrum of any and all communications that you and your supplier have, exception and dispute resolution, going back and forth with your supplier on calls, emails, messages, not just as a portal that they have to log into. Continuous accounting, accruals across complex general ledgers, global payments and disbursement, right? And tax compliance across the board, and SOX compliant audits that are PwC certified. Doing this across every single category, because at J&J, the reality is that logistics is fundamentally different from direct material, is fundamentally different from MRO spend, is fundamentally different from indirect spend, right? And you want to be able to get into the depth of each of these categories and audit these invoices, understand these contracts, and be able to audit this at scale. What's the math on this? AI tends to be about half the cost of a BPO outsourcing operation, tends to be somewhere between 60% of an in-house team that's driving this. And if you're going to try to build this yourself, good luck. At scale, some of the largest companies that are fundamentally AI-first businesses that are building foundational models trust Freehand to essentially run their accounts payable teams. And so effectively at scale, what we're doing is taking your current operation and making this dramatically cheaper for your existing service levels, But not only are we cheaper, we're dramatically better. You care about coverage of invoices, you care about accuracy, you care about turnaround times. Effectively, at scale, our largest customer today handles 5.7 million invoices a day. We handle 5.7 million invoices a day for our largest customer, and we turn those invoices around, approving, rejecting, and contesting those invoices in under 30 seconds. No human team is able to do this at scale. What then do your teams do? What they should be doing, which is effectively focusing on financial planning, strategic analysis, and effectively governance at scale. Because ultimately, nobody wants to be sitting and pushing invoices, coordinating with suppliers, and trying to manage this at scale. Really, you should be focused on running your business, which is what most of the largest businesses in the planet are doing today, from Fortune 500s to high growth startups. And so my ask of you is this: bring your hardest category, your most complex exceptions. We'll show it to you within 24 to 48 hours that we understand the category and understand accounts payable better than the expert that is on your team and better than the category expert that's in your operations team. And within 90 days, we'll essentially run that process for you completely autonomously. That's what we do. We think BPOs are 2004. We happen to be in 2026, and there's a different and better way to do this.